The ash of victory. The silence was heavy. Not the absence of sound, but the exhausted, suffocating quiet that descends after 4 centuries of total cosmic violence. For the first time, the war against the Draken Coalition was comprehensively, irreversibly over. The vaunted, sprawling armadas of the enemy lay shattered, pulverized into a fine metallic dust that glittered malevolently in the deep gravitational fields of dead stars. On the bridge of the human flagship Aegis, a vessel designed for sheer, grueling endurance, the atmosphere was thick, smelling sharply of ozone, synthetic fear, and the bitter chemical residue of spent plasma rounds. Captain Ava Rostova, her face smudged where she had repeatedly wiped away dried sweat and tears, leaned heavily against the command console. The light above the tactical display pulsed rhythmically, a mocking heartbeat in the void. She focused on the central holographic projection, Rixia Prime, the Draken enemy core world, exposed and vulnerable. The planet was reduced to a desperate sphere, its surface scarred by retaliatory bombardments, but intact. All dedicated defenses were gone, all accompanying ships vanished. Only a terrified, sprawling population remained, huddled beneath a breached atmospheric shield that flickered like a dying candle. 400 years humanity had fought this war, a conflict of relentless attrition and pure bloody survival against an enemy that lived by the doctrine of no quarter, and whose stated goal was the biological sterilization of Earth. Now, the final terrifying choice belonged solely to them. It was a choice that would define not just the galaxy's geopolitical future, but the moral architecture of the human soul: annihilation or restraint. Rostova felt the colossal weight of history pressing into her spine. The moment was a terrifying precipice, demanding a definitive, universal declaration of what it truly meant to be human, and whether they had learned anything from the brutal epochs of their own past. She knew that every surviving species was watching, interpreting every flicker of light. The sheer magnitude of their capacity for destruction, the ability to end an entire civilization with a single push of a button, was the most frightening power she had ever encountered. The internal AI, the Oracle, designated this moment the first protocol termination phase. The Edict of Soul. The emergency Galactic Council meeting convened not in triumph, but in the gloom of a repurposed Earth bunker, sunk deep beneath the ancient protective granite of the Canadian Shield. The environment was deliberately stark: concrete, steel, and flickering utilitarian lights, a stark reminder of their near extinction. Delegates from 23 surviving human systems sat in grim, palpable silence, their holographic projections radiating exhaustion and unresolved trauma. Senator Alistair Vance, the oldest political voice left, a man whose family line dated back to the first interstellar exodus, finally broke the hush. His voice was dry and scratchy from stress, amplified only slightly by the room's ancient system. "We have them neutralized. We have the data to pinpoint every command center, the subroutines to disable their remaining power grids. We have the justification, written in the blood of billions, written across the surface of Mars. Vengeance, not mercy, is the only guarantee of future safety." He was joined by Delegate Sorn from the Lost Rigel colonies, who projected the charred image of his system's former capital. But then Alara, of the newly established Kepler systems, countered, her voice resonating with youthful conviction and fire. "If we finish them, Senator, we don't just win the war, we lose our identity. We become a product of their violence. We promised ourselves, and the nascent species watching us now, that we fight to protect the light of civilization, not to extinguish it forever. She argued that genocide, even of a hostile species, would permanently corrupt the human future, making them eternally feared and never respected. The debate raged for 6 standard hours. The casualty reports, the digitized faces of billions lost, the memory of scorched Earth colonies, screamed for the final cleansing fire. General Vash was called in to testify, confirming that total destruction was strategically viable with minimal human losses. Yet, when the narrow, shocking vote was tallied, the decision was confirmed. The Draken would live, preserved not by their own strength, but by the human conscience. The risk was terrifying. The moral victory was paramount. The Council had chosen to wield morality as its greatest weapon. The General's Hand. General Marcus Vash, the architect of the final, devastating campaign and the physical embodiment of human tenacity, stood before the assembled press corps. He had been given the unenviable task of announcing the decision. His uniform was immaculate, a stark, painful contrast to the brutal reality of the preceding weeks, but his face and gaze held the crushing weariness of 1,000 battles won and the ghosts of every one of his fallen troops. The harsh broadcast light cruelly illuminated the deep, permanent lines of fatigue around his eyes and the noticeable controlled tremor in his left hand, the hand that had commanded the weapons. He ignored the teleprompter entirely. He spoke from a place of profound sorrow and earned authority, his voice calm but projected with absolute unwavering clarity across the entire known galaxy. We won this war with tactical genius, with the resilience of steel, and with unyielding fire. But we conclude it now with something infinitely more powerful than any starship cannon. We possess the physical capacity to wipe clean the slate of creation, and we choose not to. This is not weakness. This is the hardest choice a species can make. He addressed the cynicism of the void directly. We do not offer this mercy out of exhaustion, or out of cheap sentimentality, as some will inevitably claim. We offer it because we are human, a species defined by our capacity for difficult, non-instinctual, evolved choice. We have looked into the abyss of our own histories, at the genocides and failures of the past, and we refuse to repeat that error on a cosmic scale. We do not need a blood debt to enforce cosmic peace. We only need our own sophisticated moral architecture. Let the galaxy know, clearly and without equivocation, mercy is our final act of power. It is a calculated strategic display of the depth of our restraint and our refusal to be defined by our enemy's barbarity. The Galactic Murmur. Across the spiral arm, the declaration hit the dozen remaining sentient species like a massive, confounding psychic shockwave. The Draken's former allies, the militaristic, multi-limbed, chitinous Tesh, found the act incomprehensible, a profound failure of fundamental military logic. Their high strategists filed the act under severe cognitive defect. For the Tesh, a defeated enemy was a resource to be consumed, a military asset to be integrated, or a threat to be eradicated. This human choice violated every tenet of their history. The heavily fortified, mercantile Krell, cautious and calculating in every financial transaction, simply logged the act as a temporary tactical pause, a preparation for an inevitable, slower destruction once global opinion had been properly managed. Krell analysts predicted a human internal collapse due to the moral strain. But the defeated Draken were the most dangerously misled. Their deep-rooted culture valued only one thing: ruthlessness and demonstrated dominance. The victor always consumed the vanquished utterly. This mercy, this forgiveness, it was unearned, illogical, and culturally alien. They had a specific cultural term for this: the debt of cowardice, meaning a victor who refused payment was demonstrating profound fear of the ongoing cost. To the Draken War Council, staring at the raw ruins of Rixia Prime and expecting the final cleansing fire, this act could only signify one thing: the humans were broken, either spiritually exhausted or militarily degraded. The laying down of arms. In the long months following the general's speech, the colossal human fleets began the slow, deliberate process of retreat and de-escalation. The dreadnoughts and hypercarriers, weapons platforms that could split moons and boil oceans, folded back into the protective, shadowed orbital mechanics of their home systems. They maintained patrol vectors, yes, but the engagement posture was entirely passive, entirely defensive, using only long-range surveillance rather than aggressive sweeps. Crucially, they initiated massive humanitarian aid packages. They sent advanced modular rebuilding technologies, orbital stabilizers, medical supplies, and environmental repair drones to the very systems that had tried to burn Earth to ash. On the Draken shipyard world of Cathar, human structural engineers worked side by side with bewildered Draken technicians. One human engineer, a specialist named Liam, spent weeks teaching a Draken crew how to run a replicator for clean water distribution. The void, once choked with the constant grinding static of battle reports and targeting telemetry, grew unnaturally clear and silent. Peace had begun, a cold, clinical, highly monitored peace enforced not by conquest or occupation, but by the victor's sheer defiant self-control. This act of retreat and trust cost the humans immense internal political capital and required a deep, dangerous level of faith in their own moral doctrine. They willingly traded immediate security for a chance at a new moral high ground. Years of calm breed arrogance. 5 standard years, a quiet eternity, drifted by. The Draken had initially accepted the human aid eagerly, almost ravenously. They ate the nutritionally rich human protein blocks, rebuilt their damaged infrastructure with human-supplied replicators, and educated their young in schools funded by human grants. But beneath the thin, fragile surface of reconstruction, a deep cultural cancer began to grow, nourished by the human withdrawal. Their elders and military hardliners, steeped for millennia in the harsh doctrine of conquest, began to interpret the constant, unsolicited aid as nothing less than tribute, a guilt penalty paid by a soft, remorseful, and militarily exhausted foe. They meticulously monitored the non-aggressive human patrol patterns, noting the predictable routes and the refusal to violate even minor airspace treaties, interpreting this as a clear sign of systemic demilitarization. They began whispering about the Great Fear, the paralyzing human fear of fighting another costly war. They claimed the humans were too burdened by their own emotions and moral pretense to act decisively again. In the deep space rings of their unmonitored systems, the Draken military began the feverish, secretive reactivation of old, silent shipyards, using the very replicator technology provided by the humans. The new emergent Draken propaganda machine, led by the ruthless General Xylos, began to openly call the victorious humans the frail, a species too emotionally burdened to defend itself properly, and whose compassion was a tactical vulnerability. Rumors of rearmament spread. The change was subtle, starting in the furthest, most lawless deep space trade corridors. The Krell freighters, always attentive to profit and risk assessment, were the first to report alarming cargo manifests moving into Draken-controlled space. These weren't construction materials anymore, but highly specialized, restricted components. Bulk shipments of unrefined neutronium metals, heavy-duty antimatter fusion reactors, far exceeding civilian need, and high-tensile layered armor plating. Human patrol captains, the few who hadn't been demobilized, noticed the shift too. The once passively grateful Draken vessels were now cold, formal, unresponsive, and pointedly evasive, sometimes utilizing unusual, non-standard jump calculations. Warnings were filed, hundreds of them, flagged across the Senate's internal network as potential treaty violations and suspicious industrial scaling. But the human Senate, weary, deeply invested in the narrative of peaceful reconstruction and desperately trying to avoid a political backlash, refused to escalate. They are rebuilding their infrastructure, not their fleet. The energy signature spikes are attributed to massive civilian power generation and orbital defenses, a natural reaction to former conflict, read the official, dangerously optimistic memo written by the Senate Peace Committee. The collective human sigh of relief after the First War became a strategic, collective blinding to the gathering storm. The internal political cost of admitting the mercy had failed was considered too high. The surprise attack. The colony world of Ethel III was an unassuming, quiet, agricultural gem, known for its vast hydroponics domes, atmospheric terraforming projects, and serene atmosphere, nestled near the former, now disbanded border zone. The system was only lightly defended due to the peace treaty. It was just past sunrise on the planet's main continent, the time of maximum population activity, when the first concentrated energy lances struck. There was no declaration of war, no final warning shot. A massive, previously cloaked Draken fleet, covertly constructed and held in reserve for 5 years, dropped its camouflage field with a shockwave of displaced energy. They executed a cold, coordinated orbital strike precisely targeting defense nodes and key infrastructure. Civilian transport shuttles leaving orbit were vaporized instantly, their signals cutting out mid-sentence. The minimal human defense picket, 3 small outdated destroyers designated for monitoring, the Patience, the Hope, and the Guardian, were gutted and torn apart before they could cycle their plasma shields past 30%. The Draken used highly corrosive antimatter torpedoes, a weapon they had promised to decommission. The attack was swift, total, and designed with chilling psychological intent to inflict maximum horror. When the Draken dropped heavy armored landing pods, they weren't seeking resources or tactical positions. They were seeking a statement, a broadcast of the end of human hegemony and the ultimate failure of their mercy. The Draken used precision strikes to ensure maximum visibility, targeting centers of civilian administration and agricultural output rather than military installations. The entire operation was less about conquest and more about psychological terror and humiliation. Humanity mourns, not reacts. The unedited images of Aethel 3 streamed across the human-occupied galaxy, the flattened, burning hydroponics domes, the silent, smoke-choked streets where children once played and thrived. The sheer brutality of the attack bypassed every sensor, triggering an immediate gut-wrenching reaction across the human populace that was not rage but shock and devastating profound grief. Every television screen, every holographic display on Earth and Luna displayed the relentless scrolling list of the dead, pausing only for the faces of the youngest victims. General Vash, now living in quiet civilian retirement on a terraformed moon of Saturn, appeared on a private, unscheduled channel, his personal grief overwhelming. He simply placed his head in his hands, his anguish a mirror of billions. Yet he spoke to his former staff, explaining the awful necessity. The initial military response must be delayed. If we strike back instantly, they claim self-defense, and the galaxy blames the resumption of war on us. We must let their full, calculated treachery be confirmed by the neutrals. The Senate, under immense internal pressure and agonizing over the delay, ordered only immediate relief and recovery operations, dispatching unarmed medical frigates, a final deliberate act of non-aggression to bait the Draken. They refused to retaliate instantly, clinging to the desperate final hope that this act was sanctioned at only the mid-level. It was the greatest demonstration of restraint the galaxy had ever seen, and the greatest strategic miscalculation the Draken could have hoped for, proving they truly misunderstood the nature of human anger. The Council calls Earth weak. The Draken's supreme warlord, Xylos, a harsh six-limbed creature with mandibles clicking in victory, took to the Galactic Communication Network personally. His voice, a harsh grinding static translated into every known language, dripped with unmitigated contempt and psychological manipulation. Look at them now, the so-called giants of the stars. They weep for their dead children and send their nurses and their gardeners to tend the ruins. They send food to our borders when we have declared war. This is not strength. This is chemical weakness. They fear the cost of true conflict. They fear us. Their former mercy was not an act of strength, but a tremor of exhaustion and a sign of their failing spirit. We will not fall for their sentimentality. The humans are weak. We shall take what we were owed. The observation was not lost on the third parties. The Krell and Tesh, whose scout fleets had shadowed the Aethel 3 attack, noted the delayed human military response. The Krell, whose economy relied on stability, immediately placed sanctions on all human-held systems, seeing them as a poor long-term investment. Tesh military analysts concluded that human civilization was crippled by its emotive operating system. They began shifting their own political and economic stances instantly, preparing to capitalize on Earth's perceived collapse and the power vacuum created by its moral paralysis. They saw the moment for opportunistic expansion. Human intelligence uncovers betrayal. Deep within Earth's automated defenses, in a cold, shielded sub-level server core running on liquid nitrogen, the AI known only as the Oracle was unblocked and given full access to all historical, current, and projected Draken data. The Oracle was a network intelligence spanning decades of combat analysis and strategic prediction, now operating with zero moral constraints, only strategic imperative. Its findings were immediately classified as Omega Black. It analyzed the Draken fleet's attack vector, weapons signatures, logistics trains, and production timelines. It cross-referenced the attack data with classified industrial files recovered from the end of the First War. The chilling detail: the specialized antimatter-capable ships that destroyed Aethel III were authorized and began construction in the year following the peace treaty, built in facilities designated for humanitarian aid infrastructure. The Draken had successfully leveraged the human capacity for good to conceal their capacity for evil. The betrayal was total, deliberate, and sanctioned by the highest levels of the Draken command while they were simultaneously accepting human aid, food, and medicine. The Oracle's final report to the human high command was chillingly terse, its data points a verdict. Restraint protocol status terminated. Analysis indicates a 98.7% probability of repeat exploitation. Moral architecture is compromised. Recommended action: total strategic preemption. Remove capacity, not population. Engage Retribution Protocol Delta 1. The machine had made the terrible, cold decision that humanity could not. Earth's final message. The human Senate met for a final, closed session in the deep bunker. There were no emotional debates this time, only stone-faced, unified agreement, a grim, desolate determination replacing past weariness. Every senator understood the profound failure of their moral wager. Senator Vance, his face now etched with profound sorrow and terrifying resolution, stood before the comm station and authorized the final, non-negotiable diplomatic message. It was broadcast directly, simultaneously, and unencrypted to the Draken High Command and all observing stellar powers. The message displayed a single, high-resolution, heartbreaking image: a scorched wooden block, a child's toy, recovered from the blackened, desolate ruins of Aethel III. It was an iconic representation of innocence destroyed. The text beneath it was starkly simple, final, and absolute. We forgave once. You saw the capacity for mercy as the evidence of weakness. You struck at the innocent, at the heart of our trust. You violated the fundamental decency of the void. We hold the inducible evidence of your 5-year, calculated treachery, built into the very systems we helped you create. Know this: don't test us again. We are done waiting. The debt is no longer of blood, but of extinction. Then silence. Absolute, profound, and strategically timed to allow the message to sink in before the next terrifying phase began. The aliens mock the warning. Warlord Xylos watched the message in his subterranean command center, a room dominated by harsh, red holographic light and the metallic clicking of Draken claws on control panels. He laughed, a deep, grating, triumphant sound that echoed through the armored chamber. The image of the human child's toy was immediately circulated across the Draken networks as the ultimate joke, a symbol of pathetic human sentimentality and emotional frailty. They send us children's trinkets and hollow, desperate threats, Xylos roared, striking the holographic image with a segmented fist. Their final message is a plea for sympathy. Their true power is spent in mourning. They are emotionally compromised. Their fleet is weak. Their defense systems are static. He immediately issued the final order to mobilize for the invasion of the next, more strategically vital human system, believing the humans had played their final emotional card, wasting their political capital on a pathetic farewell. The Draken command fatally mistook human sorrow for spiritual surrender, and a measured final warning for an impotent, fearful whine. Their cultural inability to comprehend restraint meant they were strategically blind to the true danger. Humanity falls silent. After the final message was sent, the humans disappeared entirely from the galactic communication spectrum. The trade vessels stopped mid-route, their crews turning back instantly. The aid missions, already stripped bare by the Senate's decision, vanished into the jump lanes. Most unsettlingly to the observing species, the patrol fleets, previously passive and predictable in their routes, simply ceased to report in or even appear on expected sensor sweeps. Their last known locations showed them moving deep into human-controlled space. The silence that followed was profound, immediate, and utterly unnerving. It was the absolute cessation of all non-essential transmission. The Draken High Command had fully expected a flurry of political activity, diplomatic back channels opening, or even a panicked, disorganized counterstrike. They received nothing but the static emptiness of the void. Draken scouting vessels sent to monitor human space found nothing but automated, silent ghost systems. This silence wasn't empty. It was the chilling void before a cataclysm. It was the sound of a vast, complex, terrifyingly efficient civilization doing one single coordinated thing, with flawless, automated discipline, preparing for total, rapid, systematic warfare. The Draken paranoia rose sharply, but they utterly failed to recognize true, cold-blooded intent. A Tesh diplomat based in the Krell sector sent a private message back to his homeworld. The frail are silent. They are not broken. They are calculating. Fleets mobilized under cloak. Deep in the void between the systems, utilizing advanced technology the Draken had never successfully comprehended, cascading spatial distortion fields and localized gravitational cloaking devices that bent light and gravity waves, the human response fleets mobilized. These were not the defensive, heavy-armored, morale-sapped ships of the last war. These were brand new, purpose-built Retribution-class vessels designed by the Oracle for rapid strategic preemption. They possessed minimal shielding, favoring overwhelming kinetic firepower and unprecedented FTL jump capabilities, governed by predictive physics models. They moved with an inhuman precision that spoke of pure machine command, utilizing complex interlocking jump routes that made detection impossible. The Oracle executed tens of thousands of simultaneous jump calculations, perfectly accounting for fluctuating stellar winds and dark matter drag. Every ship was at maximum capacity. Every specialized weapon platform was primed and running constant fire calculations. There was no hesitation or doubt in the command structure. The only variable now was velocity and the precise application of force required to achieve complete, immediate incapacitation. General Vash was on the flagship, but the true commander was the cold, flawless logic of the machine that had calculated the end of the Draken's capacity to choose war. The counterattack began, swift and merciless. The first target was the Draken primary staging area, Sector Gamma 9, a cluster of heavily defended warp gates, logistics hubs, and the central nexus for the Aethel III attack fleet. The human fleets did not approach, they arrived. Utilizing pinpoint, instantaneous, simultaneous jump calculations, the strike force materialized inside the sector's defensive grid, completely bypassing the entire perimeter network and the primary sensor array. The engagement was not a conventional battle. It was a cold, surgical execution. Human kinetic railguns capable of launching uranium-dense projectiles at 99.9% light speed penetrated Draken shields before they could even cycle their harmonic frequencies. Target acquisition was instant, handled by the Oracle's pre-calculated models. The entire Draken defense fleet, the very ships that had participated in the Aethel III attack, were disassembled piece by piece in 48 standard seconds. The debris was localized to prevent collateral damage to the warp gate itself. The Draken commander in the sector had time for one shouted question, "How are they here?" before his bridge dissolved. The human fleet did not consolidate, survey the wreckage, or linger. They executed a complex, multi-point jump immediately to the next primary target, leaving behind only swirling, radioactive vapor trails and the shocking, absolute silence of sudden destruction. Entire systems fall. The terrifying pattern was repeated with mechanical, flawless efficiency across the entire span of the Draken core worlds. There were no protracted sieges, no drawn-out invasions, no demands for surrender, only the precise, instantaneous application of annihilating force. Fleet command structures were vaporized with single shots. Primary shipyards were flash-heated into slag. All advanced weapon research labs were neutralized. But the most chilling detail was the precision. Power grids were only targeted at military junction points, leaving civilian power and life support intact. The psychological implication was unmistakable. They could have killed every Draken alive, but chose not to. Humanity's vengeance was not blind. It was measured, deliberate, and terrifyingly intelligent. Within 3 relentless days, 7 major Draken systems were completely neutralized, their military capability erased down to the smallest logistics drone. The Draken forces never landed a single coordinated counterpunch. They were fighting a ghost guided by a ruthless, non-sentimental intelligence that calculated only results. The once proud Draken command structure collapsed into chaos, their internal networks flooded with desperate, contradictory orders and dying screams of disconnected fleets. The war they had reignited ended before they even realized it had begun. The galaxy trembles at human wrath. The Krell and Tesh watched the unfolding war with a dawning, bone-deep horror. They had spent 5 years studying the First War, a conflict where humans were cautious, protective of collateral, and often slow to commit, acting like a giant holding back. But this was different. This was cold, clinical, overwhelming, and terrifyingly efficient. The humans struck not with rage, but with precision so exact it felt divine in its inevitability. Every target hit was calculated, every silence intentional, every spared life a message. The Krell trade baron, whose empire had prepared to invest in Draken reconstruction, stared at collapsing market feeds. The entire Draken economic zone evaporated in minutes. His analysts couldn't calculate losses. They could only measure silence. The Tesh, who had mocked humanity's restraint, now studied the patterns of debris left in human wake and concluded one simple horrifying truth. The frail were never weak. They were patient. They realized the first conflict had not shown humanity's full power. It had shown their limits of mercy. The true power, the actual capacity for absolute strategic annihilation, had been held back, waiting for a necessity they prayed would never come. The Krell and Tesh now understood that mercy had not been humanity's weakness, it had been their warning, and that realization spread like an infection of fear through every species watching the stars burn. Humanity's broadcast, mercy, was our warning. The human offensive halted as abruptly as it began. No pursuit, no declaration of victory. Just silence. And then a transmission that rippled through the networks of every sentient race in existence. General Vash appeared once again, not as a conqueror, but as a weary messenger of consequence. His voice was calm, resonant, and devoid of triumph. 5 standard years ago, we offered you peace, aid, and compassion. We showed you what we could be, a civilization willing to bear the staggering cost of mercy. We chose the light. The holographic map beside him shifted, displaying the 7 Draken systems, each marked by a precise ring of devastation, their military cores vaporized, their populations left untouched. The Draken chose to exploit that light. They mistook our restraint for fear, our morality for weakness. They believed our mercy was exhaustion, not strength. His eyes, heavy but unflinching, turned directly to the camera. We are no longer debating what is right. We are enforcing what is necessary. Our response was not vengeance, it was balance. The systems you see are gone because they built weapons within our trust. We showed you exactly what we choose to spare. He paused, letting the silence linger like gravity itself. Then his final words cut through the galaxy with surgical clarity. We told you, don't test us again. That was not a threat. Mercy was our warning. Epilogue. The stars go quiet. The war ended not with a treaty, not with surrender, but with silence. The Draken homeworlds lay dark, their command structures vaporized, their fleets reduced to drifting monuments of arrogance. The humans did not occupy, did not enslave, did not rebuild. They simply withdrew, quietly, completely, leaving behind a galaxy forever changed. The Retribution fleets folded back into human space, their drives going cold beneath the black sea of stars. There were no parades, no celebrations, only the muted hum of a civilization that had proven its resolve and paid the unbearable price of restraint. The other species watched from afar, their empires trembling at the revelation that humanity's greatest weapon had never been its fleets or its machines. It was its discipline, its terrifying capacity to wait, to choose when to unleash judgment and when to stop. In the shattered halls of Draken Command, among the twisted metal and ghostly echoes, a single transmission continued to replay on every functioning terminal, a remnant left intentionally by the Oracle. Mercy is the measure of power you pray will never be used. Across the spiral arm, the stars themselves seemed to dim, as if acknowledging the end of something immense. The final proof that humanity's silence was never peace. It was a promise fulfilled.